Hello everyone, my name is Akshita and this is the fourth video in Team 542's FTC CAD series. And this one's going to be all about assemblies. So the first thing you want to do when you're starting an assembly is open one. And you might have noticed that you have that option here in your home page when you first open SOLIDWORKS. So let's just go ahead and click that. And you might remember me saying from a previous video, but assemblies are basically just when you put multiple parts together. And it really helps you visualize your model before you actually build it in real life. So when you first open an assembly, it automatically prompts you to opening a part from your file explorer. But the way you might also do it is immediately seeing this begin assembly tab over here in your properties manager, and you can go here, click the browse button, and it'll take you to the same place as before. I'm just going to start off with inserting a random part. Let's go with this one. So you can see that when I insert a part, I can move it around. I can't really rotate. I can just go between different views. But this is the first step into creating an assembly. It's placing down your part. And when you place down your part, you have multiple different options. So if you drag your mouse here, then you can go into the properties manager and scroll around. And if you drag it back over here, then you can just continue dragging it around. But when you go into the properties manager over here and you scroll down, you'll see all of these different options. There's really only 3 that you need to worry about. The first one is the graphics preview. If you don't have this check marked, then you're not going to be able to see your part when you first open it, but you will be able to see it after you click the check mark or left click, because then it'll actually insert that part into your assembly. But it's usually better to have that turned on so you can see what's going on and configure the part in a way that you want before actually starting the assembly. The next one that you should look at is the Show Rotate Context toolbar. And what that is this toolbar over here. Usually it's down here, but I like to move it around, and so can you. But I like to keep it up here in the top corner. And what this lets you do is it lets you rotate your part before you actually place it down. And I think that's pretty helpful because you can get it in the orientation that you want. And I'm just going to keep it like this for now. And the last check mark you should look at is the fix float component on insert. So I'll show you guys what it means to fix a component or float a component later, but you can decide whether or not you want the one you are currently on to be fixed, floated, or if you always want the first component that you insert into any assembly to be automatically fixed. So just keep that in mind, and you can change any of these on your own later. But now I'm just going to left click, and now my part is there. And another thing you should keep in mind when you're inserting your part is that when you insert a part and you just place it down and you just left click, if it's not the first part or you don't have this fix first component part enabled, then it'll just be placed randomly in your assembly screen. But if you click the check mark, then it'll place the part at the origin of your assembly. And it's usually better to click the check mark because then everything is nice and organized and in one place. And you can see that when I come over here and click the check mark, it automatically snaps to place at the origin. So there you go. Now you know how to insert a part in SOLIDWORKS assembly. As I mentioned before, you can either fix or float parts in SOLIDWORKS. So when you're in your assembly and you look at your properties manager, you can see either an F or a minus at the beginning of the name of your part. So right here, I see an F, and that means that this part is fixed. And when something is fixed, that means you can't rotate it or move it around. You can see that when I try to move left and right, you have the little pop-up here that says the selected component is fixed, and I can't rotate it either. And you can change that by either right-clicking the name of the part in your properties manager and clicking float, or you can do the same thing by right-clicking the part itself and clicking float. And now you can see that in the properties manager, next to the name of the part, there's a minus symbol, and I can move it around, rotate it, do whatever I want. And you can change back by doing the same exact thing, and now it's fixed in its position. Now let's move on to mates in an assembly. So when you're mating something, you need at least 2 different objects. So let's insert a new object. You can do that by clicking over here in Insert Components and doing the same thing as before, clicking Browse and opening your File Explorer. I'm going to insert this part called Solid Cylinder. And I'm going to rotate it so that it's in an orientation that I want to go into this hole, just like that. There we go. And as you can see, this one is floating right now. You can rotate it around, move it around. So mates in SOLIDWORKS are basically sketchulations, but for 3D objects, and you'll see what I mean. So when I want to mate something, I'm going to go over here and click the mate button. And in my properties manager, this new screen called mates pops up. And you can see most of the mates here are very similar to the ones you would see in sketch relations. When you're using mates in SOLIDWORKS, there are certain things you can mate together with certain mates and certain things that you can't mate together with certain mates. Similar to sketch relations, for example, you can't have a line or a point be both vertical and horizontal to another point. And it works the same way here. So for coincident, similar to sketch relations, it puts the 2 objects or entities that you select on the same surface or plane. You can see that I selected these 2 faces and now they're on the same plane. And when I press the check mark is when that mate actually gets applied. So now you can see that even if I try moving it around, when you actually look at it, it's still in the same surface or plane. So I can move it around, but regardless, it'll be in the same surface or plane because I put in that coincident mate. Now I'm going to go back into that mate and show you guys the other ones that you can use. You can go back into a mate by going to the drop down menu here and right clicking it and clicking edit feature, and you can also view the mates for each part by doing the drop down menu and going to the mates here. And that'll be really useful once you start making assemblies with multiple parts. So I'm just going to delete this one for now, go back into mate and show you guys the rest of them. So parallel works the same way. You have these 2 faces and now they're parallel to each other. You can also do perpendicular. Now these 2 faces are perpendicular to each other. And you can see that when one mate is applied, or when you choose 2 entities, there's certain mates that it doesn't let you choose, because it wouldn't make sense to make something like 2 circular faces tangent to each other. That wouldn't make sense. Or it wouldn't make sense to have 2 circular faces be concentric. So just keep that in mind. If I wanted to do tangent, I would have to have a line and a circle, and you can try experimenting with that, but that's pretty self-explanatory. And then you have the concentric one, which is going to be really, really useful when you do assemblies in FTC. It lets you put 2 circular entities, edges, or whatever in the same axis, and you can see that by going here and enabling temporary axes, and you can see that the 2 axes are in the same sort of, the axes become collinear when you make a concentric mate. There's also 2 other mates that are pretty important to know about, and those are lock and the distance mate. So the lock mate takes whatever position your 2 entities that you select are currently at and locks them in that position. So for example, if I selected this face and this face, and I clicked the lock, even though it's in a very random orientation, it'll lock this current orientation of those 2 things together. And you can see now that I can't move this around because of that lock mate. So I'm going to delete that. And the distance mate is also really useful when you're CADing in FTC. I'm going to start off by just making these 2 things concentric. And the distance mate lets you, determine how much of a distance is between 2 entities that you choose. So if I choose this face and this face, and I enable the distance mate, I can increase this to make it go further away from each other, and decrease the distance to make it closer to each other. It's kind of lagging right now, but now you can see that when I decreased it, it's getting closer and closer. There's one more trick that I want to teach you guys that'll help you improve your efficiency when you're making assemblies, and that's basically copy pasting. So when you want to have two of the same part, you can do it one way by going into insert components and doing all of that, but another way you can do it is by just holding down Control and clicking and dragging the part that you want. Finally, I want to show you guys subassemblies. So right now I have two assemblies, this one which is called Assemb2, and I'm just going to save that real quick. And in this one, all I've done is apply one coincident mate to these two faces, so you can see that regardless of how I move it, it's still there, but I can still move it around. And the other assembly called Assemb1, where I've just made these two circular edges be concentric to each other, so I can still move them around. One cool thing about SolidWorks is that you can make assemblies from other assemblies. So if I click File, New, and I open an assembly, I can insert both Assemb1 and Assemb2. So I can insert Assemb1, go back to Insert Components, and also put in Assemb2. Another thing you should know when you have assemblies in assemblies, so when you have subassemblies, is that when you start off, you can't have the same movement or flexibility that you had in your assembly. So if you remember, I was able to move this cylinder in this assembly back and forth, but I'm not able to do it in this assembly. And the reason for that is when you have so many parts, being able to move every single part in every single subassembly just takes so much more processing and makes your computer a lot slower. But if you really wanted your subassemblies to have moving parts in your main assembly, you can definitely do that. So you would go into your Properties Manager, right-click the subassembly that you want to have move around, go to this thing called Component Properties, and go down here to the area that says Solve As and click Flexible instead of Rigid, and then press OK. And now you can see that I'm able to move this back and forth, and even when I mate a part of the subassembly to another part of another subassembly, let's say I put in the concentric one, I can move both this one and I can move this one. Lastly, I'm going to teach you guys about sending assemblies. So whenever you send assemblies, you have to make sure that all of your parts and assemblies and subassemblies are in one big overall folder. So you can see here that when I click into this folder, I can see the parts that I use in my assemblies, but both the folder with the parts and the assemblies are in the overall folder called vid parts. And the reason that you do this is because if you forget to have a part and that part is in your assembly and then you send it to someone else, then the assembly for them is going to error because they don't have all the parts that make it up. And another thing to remember when you're sending assemblies is that you should make your overall folder into a zip file. That's all I have for today's video for you guys. I hope you learned something new and get lots of practice with assemblies.